Hello everyone. Thanks for joining me today's stream. We've got Adrian, Meg's just popped in. Hey Meg, and ADV. Awesome. How are you doing, Meg?
I'm well, and yourself?
I'm pretty cool. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Can't really complain. Life is good. All right, let's get to it. So what I wanted to do is just change things up a little bit with regards to the formatting. So we really had like sort of a panel session going forward. So for the Wednesday stream, I'm going to do what I do on the Sunday stream, is I'm going to look at something that I find, usually just a single question or an article or something that I found that I think is interesting, just to maybe talk in depth to it for maybe even just 10-15 minutes, not too long, and then we can go to sort of like that question model, and then if anyone wants to talk, we can unmute people and get them on board, and they can ask questions. But of course, we've also got the actual questions channel itself as well. Julio, welcome. All right, let's have a look. So, what did I discover? Let's have a look what I discovered. Yeah, detect changes in Terraform state. So this one made me sort of like cringe a little bit, as you'll probably see. If anyone's done any work with Terraform, you'll look at this article and kind of be like, ooh, key. Okay, so this article is titled "Detect Changes in Terraform State," and the first line straight away worries me. So, hello, I am having troubles with state file edit, not reflecting in plans. So straight away, state file edit. So he's obviously editing the file, or I should say they are editing the state file, which is an immediate no. That is an immediate don't do that straight away, straight off the bat. I'm worried already. Does anyone know whether I'm missing any steps? You are. You're missing the step where you don't edit the state file. So there's definitely that. I'm using Terraform Cloud. So let's look at the steps he's going through. He's downloading the state. He's doing edit states to reflect to wanted state with correct instance IDs and stuff. Terraform state push. Then he's checking that state in Terraform Cloud, and he can see that the state is being reflected up there in the cloud. Then he's doing a Terraform init, and then he's doing a Terraform plan. And then the plan still says forces replacements with IDs not to be found in the last state file. My question would be, where does it find this old ID? Okay, stop. The actual question should be, should I even be doing this? Editing the state file directly in Terraform is a really bad idea. There are little pieces of metadata inside the state file that sort of keep track of changes. There's a little counter at the top, for example, that increments every time there's a change. And there's other little pieces of information in there that Terraform uses to decide whether, what version of the state it's working with, and so on and so forth. So it's generally not a good idea to manipulate the state file directly. There have been times when I've had to do this in the past, but I'm talking like 3 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago now, when it was much more difficult to use the given commands to do these changes. But in this day and age, the commands that are available are actually pretty advanced. We don't really have to go in and manipulate the state file manually anymore. As you may or may not know, it's a JSON file, so it sort of almost invites you to come in and edit it, because JSON's this format that's allowed, that's sort of human readable and machine readable, but it's definitely not to be edited by a human being directly. You're meant to be using a subcommand. So the top comment on this one actually pretty much nails it right away. So we're going to get a sort of a different sort of perspective here. So Stocker rumbles, don't ever edit state files. Use state.rm to remove things, or state.mv to move them to a new resource. If you edit them, chances are you'll F it up. Very true indeed. So he's linked here very clearly to the manipulating state Terraform CLI, Terraform by HashiCorp documentation. He then goes on to clarify, but as someone who has edited them in the past, if I remember correctly, there's a count at the top that needs incrementing, but maybe I misremembered because I don't do it anymore. It's not safe. It's not safe. Absolutely correct. There is a counter at the top, but yeah, it's not safe. So let's check out this documentation. First of all, let's go back and actually look at the problem. It sounds to me like he's got a state file that is referenced in some instances. The instances have changed and he wants to reflect the new instance IDs. Now, I don't have his state file or his setup in place, so I can't go through a line by line, command by command below of what I would do. However, if we take a look at the documentation here, let's have a look to see, make sure you can see that. Yeah, you can see that. Great. If we have a look at the documentation here, we can see that there are several state-related subcommands. So we can inspect the state, we can do forcing recreation, which is the take command and untake command. We can move things around, we can import pre-existing resources. We'll actually bring that up in another tab and we'll check that out. And then there's this disaster recovery related things as well. In this case, because he's created some instances in an existing state file, and he then wants to move the states to not look at the original instance IDs, but he now wants them to look at the new instance IDs, which can make sense if you've gone and manually created some instances for some reason on the side and you're like, oh, I need my Terraform to now manage them. That might be something that you need to do. And that's clearly what needs to be done here. In that instance, you would use, in my opinion, you would use the import. I would probably update the Terraform code to reflect the new instances and what they look like. And then I would import them. So I'd define the code and I'd import the new instances into the state. And then I'd state RM the existing ones if they actually don't exist. If they exist in Terraform, I'd just delete the code and then Terraform will take care of deleting them for you. And then provided you got your Terraform code to match the new ones that you've created, a Terraform plan should show that there are no changes because you've actually then imported those new bits of state. That would be how I would do it. I think that in some cases, infrastructure as code and these kind of tools, they do so much work for us. They make things so much better. They make things so much easier, so much safer, and so on and so forth. But they still have their limitations, and sometimes there is a little bit of manual work involved here. And in this case, this entire thing could have been avoided by, again, I don't know the background, but I would say by creating those secondary instances that he's now trying to import into the state, I would say that that could have been avoided by simply creating those new instances in the Terraform state to begin with. And then when you didn't need the old ones, you then just remove the code, and Terraform obviously sees that the code the state in the cloud provider no longer matches the desired state. And so it then deletes those instances for you. So that's where I would have gone with that. We can see here, if we have a look at the state, the overview of the state command. So this is literally how you would manipulate a Terraform state correctly. It requires zero editing of the Terraform state JSON file at all. None at all. First thing we can do is we can inspect the state. We can list all the resources that are in there. We can show specific information about a particular resource, and we can also refresh it. So if we have a look at list, it should give us an example. So we do a list. So we've done Terraform state list here, and then we can see that we've got an instance here called foo, and then this is an instance called bar with a count variable of 1. And so the internal name is obviously bar, and then the count variable is set to 1, so instance 0, and then instance 1. A count variable set to 2. And then we have an ELB. Which is inside of a module called ELB, which creates an AWS ELB for us called main. So we can see that with this simple command, we can get a list of the things that we're actually looking for, and we can even use filters here to ensure to look for specific things. So if we're interested in an instance called bar, then we can actually filter by that. And again, we can do that by module as well. If we go back, we can look at a show. If we go on down here, we can see that what we've got here is Terraform state show packet device worker. So that's obviously, that's not an AWS provider, that's the Packer provider, and it's a device called worker. And then you can see here that it actually gives you the HCL2 code here. It gives you the actual resource itself, including all of the attributes which you don't define. So remember, when you're creating stuff in AWS or in GCP or in Packer, you might not necessarily know certain attributes like the ID. You might have to then, Terraform has to go and speak to the API, and then it gets given back this API. This is called a computed attribute. And so in this case, this is how you would, if you needed this API, you would do your Terraform apply, and then you'd do your Terraform. You could either do your Terraform state show, and then you'd get back the resource with the ID field, or you could use an output, for example, in Terraform. So you could output this ID directly, and then when you do your Terraform apply and it finishes, that would appear at the bottom of the command line output. The ID would appear in there. So that's how you can view things within side of the state without having to actually open up that JSON file. My advice is just don't even open it. Don't even bother. Maybe just to peek in to a non-critical one to get an idea of, oh yeah, it's a JSON file. It's kind of what it looks like. You'll see that it's very complicated, and you should get a sense of almost dread when you look at it and go, yeah, I'm not touching that. That looks really complicated. It is really complicated. Tainting. So tainting is a really important one. So tainting is when, so I actually had a call today, about 10:30 today, about an hour ago. I had a call with someone who's currently reading through the book, the Learn DevOps book, and he was essentially having trouble SSHing into the instances that he'd created via Terraform. He'd created a key pair. He'd gone, obviously Terraform had used that key pair, and then he couldn't SSH in for some reason. So he tried to resolve the issue, and he found that he couldn't get that SSH key pair to work. What he was doing was he was updating the key pair in a Terraform, and then he was doing a Terraform apply, and then of course the key pair wasn't working. Now the problem there is there is no direct dependency between the key pair and the EC2 instance in that specific instance. So when he was then generating a new key pair, of course the EC2 instance wasn't being recreated at all. So he was still using the prior key pair that he was having trouble with. So what I recommended he did in this case as a demonstration was he used a Terraform take command. So he tainted the two EC2 instances. He did a Terraform apply. Because they were marked as tainted in the state, Terraform then recreated those instances. It's really, really simple concept. Terraform taint, and then the resource. We can have a look at it here. It then, if we go down, Terraform taint, and then the address, so the internal address, if you like. So AWS instance foo, AWS instance dot bar, and then 1. So there's that count variable again. Obviously gives you an array and a list of instances. So that's referencing that, and you can go more and more complicated. And then once you do that, it marks as tainted. And when you do your Terraform apply, Terraform sees that as you saying, I want you to recreate that resource, regardless of what you want or what you think. I need you to recreate that resource for me. That's what the taint command does. Guess what the untaint command does? The untaint command untaints a resource. So you might find that you do a taint, and then you do a Terraform plan. This is really powerful because you can do a taint and you can do a Terraform plan. And then you can actually see the entire structure of what's going to be recreated or destroyed or deleted or replaced, etc., based on that taint. And that allows you to go, whoa, hang on. I didn't realize that this other resource would be recreated as well, such as maybe a volume, maybe an EBS volume gets deleted. Shouldn't do, should just be detached and retached if it's a separate resource. However, it may get destroyed for some reason. Maybe AWS API changes, and it's a side effect that you didn't predict. So then you can use a Terraform untaint it, and then you can come up with another plan to work out to get in place what it is that you're trying to do. So that's tainting. That's getting Terraform to forcefully delete things for you. I believe that what this individual needed to do was an import. We'll come to the import in a second. We'll continue here. So we've got moving here. So moving resources is, say, for example, you've called something AWS instance dot web server, and then you realize, oh, it's not a web server, it's a database server, and I've already created it, etc. I need to rename that now. You would use the move command. You would do Terraform state mv. You'd put your AWS instance dot web server, and you'd change it to AWS instance dot database server, and that would allow you to rename it inside of the state, and then you can rename it inside of your code, and then there'll be no effect to that. So if you then do a Terraform plan, you will see no change because the state file matches the code, and so the actual state matches the desired state. So that's very useful if you need to rename things. The rm command will remove things from the state. So a good example there is you have so actually going back to that gentleman's problem. What he could have done was he could have an instance that's managed by the state and then an instance that is not managed by the state. Then what he could do is he could import this into his Terraform. And then let's say that this gets deleted manually for some reason, AWS console, AWS CLI tool, the state file's then disconnected. What you can then come in and do is do a Terraform State RM on that. So he could have imported, deleted that one, and then he could have came in and did a Terraform State RM to remove it from the state file. It's not necessarily the best way of doing it, but it's just sort of an example of where you would use this Terraform State RM command. State replace provider command. I've actually never used that. That's okay, yeah. So that kind of makes sense. So you're moving from an AWS provider to a similar provider, but you maybe a custom version of that provider. So that makes sense. So if you've used the official HashiCorp AWS provider and now you've had to fork that project and create your own resources because maybe the official one isn't being kept up to date quick enough for your needs, you can use the replace provider to flip within the state provider, and then when it does a recalculation, obviously that then makes available all of your new code that you've implemented without impacting everything else. And so you don't have to then go in and change all the resources to use your new provider by changing the provider type. The meta flag, you can just flip them over straight away. So it does it all in one go. That's quite nice. That's I can see that being very, very powerful. You've also got disaster recovery, so you got pull, push, and what's the other one? Pull, push out of force unlock. Okay, so with state files that are remotely pushed, remotely managed, I should say, there may be a need for you to pull that down and maybe make a backup of it or push it remotely. The force unlock is in the event that you run Terraform, and then it uses Terraform Cloud, or it uses GitLab's built-in Terraform state management, or perhaps you're using an S3 bucket in DynamoDB. It'll talk to DynamoDB, it'll create a lock for your state file, and then of course your Terraform then crashes partway through. The problem you have then is that lock is still in place, so then if you then try and run your Terraform apply again, the state file will be locked. So the Terraform force unlock command will, as the sort of name implies, it will delete that lock so that you can then continue to manage that state file. And the state pull and state push allow you to pull and push state from a remote backend. So you may have a Terraform state file locally, you then you update it to use a remote. When you do a Terraform apply, it will actually say, hey, I'm going to push that remote up there for you. But you can also forcefully do a state push and a state pull as well. You might want to replace the current state you have with a different one. For example, maybe an existing state that you have is corrupt in some way or bad, but you have a backup, such as a backup in an S3 bucket that has versioning enabled. You can move that aside, and then you can do a pull, and then that will pull that down, and then Terraform will adjust and use that state file for you. So that's pretty good. This gentleman in our little problem up here definitely needed to use, in my opinion, the import command, which allows you to import existing resources. So it doesn't work with every resource. I do believe most resources do work, but it's sort of provider specific, and then it's resource specific within that provider as well. So, for example, AWS instances are absolutely 100% supported, but SageMaker clusters, or whatever they're called, may not be supported. You might not be able to import anything to do with SageMaker at this point in time. But what the import allows you to do is say, I've got existing Terraform code, we've got an old piece of infrastructure that we have to keep live that's not managed by Terraform, but we want to manage it by Terraform. What you would do is you use a Terraform import, you would give it the address, which is the internal Terraform address, AWS_instance.web server, for example, and then the ID, which is the ID in, again, for example, AWS. So you'd give it the instance ID, and then what it would do is it would go and fetch it, get all the information about it, it would bring that down, and put it inside the state at that address that you've specified it, and then that's now present in your state. What you have to be wary of here, though, is it doesn't generate a Terraform, it doesn't generate a HCL file for you, so it doesn't actually generate the Terraform code. Okay, so you have to then make sure that you're actually producing the actual code itself. Now, it can actually do that for you. As Julius has actually said here, the other usage is Terraform state show to generate TF code. That's correct. If you do an import and then you use state show, it actually technically generates the code for you. So you can be a bit sneaky and you can actually import, say, 5 resources. And then what you're actually able to then do is use the state show to generate the Terraform code for those resources. You can then output them into a file or individual files, and then you can then go in and you can either delete the computed attributes that you're not interested in, or you can just leave it as is. And then because the code will match the state, if you then attempt to do a Terraform apply, there will be no difference because the resource exists in AWS, it exists in your code, and it exists inside of the state. Of course, if you then make a change to the code, Terraform then goes back to essentially its normal operation. And a good little tip there, thanks to Julio there in the chat, is if you use when you're generating the code, when you're using the state show, if you use the no color -no -color flag, that will mean that there are no color codes inside of the HCL code that gets produced. If you don't do that, when it attempts to push it out to a file, it will contain terminal color codes, which won't be pretty, and you'll have to sit there manually removing all of them. But if you use the -no -color flag, it won't include them for you, and it'll just give you raw text, plain text. So that's actually a really good tip. I believe that what this gentleman should have done was, instead of, he's got obviously separate instances over here that have got now new IDs. He could have done an import, in my opinion, generated the code, put that into his Terraform, and then done a plan. He would have seen that the Terraform state would have said, okay, I have this instance over here on the old ID. I've now got this new instance over here on the new ID. However, I've got that in my state. I'm aware of its existence. It looks perfectly fine to me. Good to go. And then I'd have just deleted the old instance, and he would have been in a perfect state. So that's my thoughts on this particular post here. To summarize, please don't edit your state file manually. It's an insane idea. And of course, use the provided tools if you need to. Use the provided Terraform state management tools, Terraform import, and so on and so forth in order to actually manipulate that file using Terraform official tools. Don't try and do it yourself. Simple as that. Adrian, still glad they had the courage to ask the question. I totally agree. It's a good question. It's good that they're asking the question because they're obviously willing to admit that they've done something wrong, or at least they're willing to openly say, "Hey, look, I'm doing this. What's wrong with that? Why isn't it working?" That being said, I don't think that this individual potentially knew that editing the state file directly was a bad idea. And as a result, they didn't really know that they were being brave and coming forward and saying, "Hey, I'm editing the state file here." I reckon it's actually probably something that a lot of newcomers to Terraform do. They probably do end up in a situation where they go, "Well, why don't I just edit this state file directly? It's just a JSON file, right?" So they probably didn't even think that it was a bad idea. I like your tip here for CloudFront distributions. CloudFront distributions are a pain in the backside. They really are. They are very complicated pieces of kit. They're fantastic pieces of kit. They do a great job, and they're obviously sort of, if you like, enterprise grade complex and enterprise grade powerful in order to compensate for the fact that there are enterprises out there that need to do really powerful things. But yeah, they are a nightmare to work with. So if you could use the AWS Web Console. Actually, you know what? When it comes to CloudFront distributions, I wonder if using the Web Console, I wonder if an example of using the Web Console to generate them, ClickOps if you like, is one of the very few examples where that's actually a good idea. So you use the Web Console, you get it working, and then you use Terraform import, and then you use state show with no colors to generate the Terraform code. And then you just kind of never touch it again. Meg, why is terminal color a bad thing? Doesn't look perfect. Terminal color looks great in the terminal. But when those colors, the reason those colors work is because any text that goes into a terminal that has color codes around it, the terminal will interpret those color codes and set the text. So you basically go, text is white, and then you go hello, space, and then you put a color code green, and you go world, and then you go color code white, and so the world comes out green, so you have hello world, white, green. Those color codes will just come out into the TF code that gets generated as well. And it does not look good inside the Terraform code file. In fact, it would break the Terraform code file. Terraform would complain that there's unknown characters inside of the file. Let's have a look. Well, good to know. Thanks, Julio. So you fail, breako. That's what I do. I create the resources, then reverse it. Yep. Or understand it. Because one issue with certain resources is multi-nested resources. Yeah. So cloud. So we do Terraform, AWS, CloudFront. Let's have a look. Let's look at a CloudFront distribution. These are chunky monkeys. Argument reference for a CloudFront distribution. So top level arguments. So straight away, I'm already frightened because there's just a set of top level arguments that go in. So okay, now we got cache behavior arguments or cache. Depending on where you are. Forwarded values arguments, lambda function association. They're just, if you go to an example usage, even just the example usage at the top, that's where it ends. That's where the resource ends. That's where it begins. That's a single CloudFront distribution. They are complex beasts. They really are complex beasts. Let's have a look here. What have we got here? Where are we? Questions. Yeah, they are pieces of kit that are very complicated. And so I actually really like the idea, and it's probably one of the few cases where I would say do this in the console and then use an import and a state show. I wonder if the same will apply for a WAF, because WAFs are pretty complicated as well. Let's have a look. AWS WAF, where are you? Julio, also cases where you don't know what the UI attribute argument component correspondent to what in the Terraform. Yeah, that's a good one. So yeah, I guess it can also API gateways are one that pop off the screen there. Definitely, that's definitely another one I would probably do it with as well. Yeah, if you don't know, if it's very complicated, or even just I don't get the corresponding Terraform attribute or arguments, I should say, sorry, versus the UI in the AWS console, doing it in the console, doing an import, doing a show, even if you don't use the code in the show, then copy paste it into go and go, cool, that's what I've got, I'm going to import. If you then just go and delete all of that and go, that's fine, that's great, because after you've done your import, because it's inside the state file, you could literally just do a Terraform destroy, and Terraform will just go boop, and it'll just delete it for you. So it'll delete that one you set up, but then you'll have an example code base that you can then work with. Is now a good time for questions, or should we wait till the end? You can ask questions throughout the whole thing, mate. Go for it, Adrian. If you want to come on and talk, we can do that too. It's entirely up to you. I can unmute you if you want to have a chat. I know Julio probably does. Let me just test this actually. Julio, I'm going to unserver mute you if you want to try talking for me. Not sure if that works.
Hello?
Yeah, that works. Cool. Okay. Yeah, no, you got some great tips there, mate. I agree. Okay. Well, while you looked it up, hey, yeah, you're good, Adrian. Yeah, I can hear you, mate. Yeah, welcome. Oh, whatever's easy for you. Either or. Mike's fine. It's a very good question. It depends on. So I have my views on what DevOps means. In the book, I very clearly outline what I believe DevOps is. And so because for me, DevOps incorporates communication, collaboration, pair programming, code reviews, CI/CD, because it's a whole holistic view to approach all the way from we have an idea through to making it live, I pretty much do it every day. So my last client, for example, BHP, big mining company, nearly 90,000 employees, huge company. I was doing DevOps there because I was uplifting Terraform Codespaces to a higher standard, and then we were putting CI pipelines in place in order to ensure that the Terraform code was going through some basic linting, validation, and some security checks. We also did some Sentinel in TF Cloud as well in order to replicate the SCP policies in a more agnostic way. In case that another cloud provider came along, it wouldn't really matter if they didn't support things like SCPs because we could just use Sentinel. And then in my current engagement, which is Suncorp, they are a bank/insurance company. Already, I've within a few days, I've been writing a Python script to automate some TLS related work in AWS. So pretty much every day. But what I would say is, if you go into an organization where it depends, I guess it depends on you as to whether you believe you're doing DevOps or not. If you go into a brand new organization and they're like, oh, we don't do DevOps at all. We just kind of clicky ops it. We just get it up. All of that funny stuff. It doesn't mean that you can't do DevOps as an individual. Even if the team collaboration isn't there, you can still use the mentality and the attitude of a DevOps engineer to go, well, I'm going to automate this, and I'm going to build the thing you've asked me to build in Terraform, and I'm going to manage the state in this way. I'm going to get security sign off on that, and I'm going to put a CI pipeline around this. So even if no one else is doing that, you can still do that. Yeah, okay. That's a good question. So, yeah, because as a contractor, because I move around a lot, I'm exposed to a lot of different problems, whether they're technical or human problems, as in communication and collaboration, a lack of skill sets and people need to be uplifted, or they can be technical problems. CI pipelines aren't working, or they don't have any to begin with. They don't have any infrastructure as code, and so on and so forth. Because I move around a lot, I'm constantly deep diving into all of these technologies and building all these things. So I'm constantly being exposed to that technology. I'm being exposed to different sort of technological problems as well, which means that I'm always writing Terraform and Python and Ansible and doing all this stuff. And even though most of the time, 80% of the work, the problem isn't really that unique. The solution can sometimes be done in a slightly unique way. So I'm always being challenged somewhat creatively to produce that code from a perspective of keeping up with industry news. So every day my front page and my Reddit is very refined down to, it doesn't have any of the front page stuff on it. It just has AWS subreddit, Terraform, DevOps. I've got a few others on there, web infrastructure, Linux, HashiCorp in general, Ansible, and so on and so forth. So and Hacker News as well is a very good one for discovering new technologies. So if you go through the front page and maybe the second page of Hacker News every day, you can just glance through and you'll see something like show Hacker News my new technology, and you'd be like, that sounds interesting. I'm going to open that in a tab. I'm going to give that a read, and you can be like, cool, that's a cool little project. And then before you know it, 3 months down the line, it gets mentioned again. And then maybe a year down the line, someone goes, oh, we use this tool. And you're like, oh, I read about that. Wow, that's gone to full production ready. And you're already aware of it, and you can kind of got an idea of what that was because you read about it a year and a half ago, for example. So using Reddit and Hacker News allows me to sort of get a consistent stream of, hey guys, check out this cool new tool I made, or does anyone know how to use X? And I'm like, what's X? And I go, wow, that's a tool I didn't even know existed, and it does this with your infrastructure as code and gives you a diagram, and it's like, that's really nice, that's pretty cool. So that gets bookmarked and put aside. And then when it comes to learning stuff, like looking at those technologies and learning them outside of the 9 to 5, that's more difficult. However, what I would say is, because I do run the DevOps Lounge and I've got the stream and I've got the videos, what I tend to do is as I'm going through Hacker News and Reddit, I'll also see people asking questions like, like our question here of, how do I do this? So I saw this and thought that's a great topic to talk about. So I copy pasted the URL. I put that into my, you probably would have got a glimpse of it actually because I messed up the browsers. I put that into ClickUp. I keep track of it. I write up how I would answer that. And then I do a video on it and I do a stream on it. And so I might see a technology that I think is so relevant to you guys in the community that what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a note of it, and then I'm going to do a video on it, and then that goes onto YouTube. And so obviously that involves me researching the tool or the utility, using it a bit, seeing it against a sort of real workload, as real as I can get. Obviously, I can't just go into a client site and be like, hey, we're going to use this thing that I found on GitHub that got wrote 3 months ago. Obviously, I have to do that on my own time. And then it gets turned into a video. And by educating you, I educate myself. So yeah, I think that answers the question. Maybe I rambled on a bit there. I do apologize if I did.
It does. I appreciate it. And my last question is, when you're studying a new technology, what does that process look like for you, and how do you take it?
So the first thing I do is I look at a new technology, and because of the businessman in my brain, the sort of entrepreneur, sort of economics wannabe nerd kind of in my head kind of goes, what problem does that solve? Like, what is that actually doing in the real world? And so if you boil down, because I think very much from a business perspective most of the time, if you think about what a business does, it essentially just solves a problem. So when I see a new tool, and let's rewind time a bit, and then let's just imagine Kubernetes just appears on the scene, and people are starting to talk about the first few versions of Kubernetes, and they're starting to get popular. And someone says, hey, have you seen this Kubernetes thing? I'd be like, okay, let's go and have a look at this. The first thing I'd look through and I'd go, I want to know what problem this is trying to solve straight away. So that's the first thing I do. And then I would obviously, continuing with Kubernetes as an example, I would go, okay, so what does it do? Well, it does. It essentially takes away all of the orchestration of your containers, and it can do auto healing. So, that pod went down. So, okay, I'm going to rebring it back up based on this policy you've defined. Okay, so I see it's solving the problem of downtime. Essentially, something crashes. I just want it to come back up again, and it does that for you. Okay, great. It can also take a change to an image and redeploy it the new pod, and it can drain the traffic over slowly, and it can do tests, and then provided that 20% of the traffic is going okay on the new version, then it'll up it to 50 and go okay, then it'll go 100 and it'll get rid of the old pods. That's pretty powerful. That just completely takes away having to even think about A/B deployments, blue-green deployments, whatever label you want to apply to them. That's really powerful. Okay, I can see this solving some real world problems. And then if those problems that it's solving are big enough and important enough, what I would then do is go, okay, I need perhaps a real world example from maybe a client that I've worked with, or something that I've got live. I've got a little app called Super Wish Lists that I just built in Go very roughly for the family. It's just like a little wish list app that we use for Christmas and birthdays and things like that. I might go, well, what happens if I what happens if I containerize it? Is actually containerized. What if I take that container, which I just deploy with Ansible? What if I actually just throw that in Kubernetes? So if we fast forward to today and we just assume that we've got EKS and managed Kubernetes, I'd go, okay, well, I'm going to create a managed cluster. I'm going to look at this pod thing. I'm going to write a pod. I'm going to see it go live. And then I'm going to essentially almost solve the original problem I had, which was everyone emailing each other a wish list for their birthday, and then forwards going out and getting mixed up, and people forwarding a message to me saying they're going to buy me that book that I asked for. And it's like, well, there's the surprise gone. So I wrote this app, and so therefore, okay, now I'm going to take that, I'm going to solve the problem again, because I've already solved it, but I'm going to solve it again with Kubernetes now, and I'm going to see what that can do for me. And I'm going to try and, one of the other things I try and do is to try and break it. So like, for example, with the example of Kubernetes, you can go, well, if a member of the cluster goes down, all the pods are rescheduled. Okay, prove it. Done. Pull the cable out, pull the power out. I want to see that actually happen. I want to see that go through. I want to see that when I pull that cable, I want to see how quickly those pods reschedule, and can they go faster? Is there something about my recovery policies that are slowing that down, and so on and so forth. So I tend to look at new technologies immediately from the perspective of what real world problems it's trying to solve from a business economics perspective within the technology space. Okay, cool. And then I apply a problem that either is a very common, well-known problem, like a load-balanced web application, or a problem that I've already got and solved, like super wish lists, and I try and make that tool then improve that for me, or resolve the problem, and then I can go, okay, cool, I understand how that works now. And then I can kind of go, that's a yay or a nay from me. Like I actually found that harder versus doing this, or it was slow. And so I would then, if they've got a repository, I would star it in GitHub, and then just I see notifications, and then I kind of keep track of it and see if it maintains being maintained, getting improved, and so on and so forth. As for notes, I bought a Remarkable, got a Remarkable 2. It's just then like an e-ink thing. I'll tend to just kind of like draw little things and scribble things just to sort of think, sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Sort of, sort of brainstorm the problem and kind of go, what's the problem? And I look at it and then I go, right, I'm going to use the new tool now to do that, and then go through. Sometimes I'll, if it was something, because the book's relatively new, if it was something that I felt was good enough and big enough and important enough to go into the book, I would probably write much more extensive notes in the form of maybe a draft for the book. I'd actually create a page, set it as a draft, or put it in the draft branch, and then I would actually write out bullet points and start expanding on it and screenshots and things like that, and then I'd brush that up to be production ready, publication ready, I should say, and then I'd fit that somewhere in the book and make that go live. No problem. Thanks, Adrian. Good questions, mate. I don't actually use Kubernetes that much. I really don't. Most of my clients don't use it, and I don't have a need for it personally. Very limited. Yeah, no. You'll have to enlighten me. My problem with Kubernetes is that I've studied it, and I've not got the official Kubernetes certificate. I did like a Linux Foundation certification on Kubernetes, and I've actually got a load of physical boxes here, and I had a cluster on it for a while. But then my problem is that I didn't have a need for it myself, and none of my clients use it. Yeah, no, I agree entirely. I do. Don't get me wrong. Because I don't use Kubernetes day to day. What I would say is it doesn't mean that I don't agree that Kubernetes is a great idea. I do. I really like it. I think that is an example of why it's so powerful. You can build a managed Kubernetes cluster, and then you're defining everything in Kubernetes. Let's just call it in Kubernetes resources. Everything's Kubernetes land, and in the moment AWS, let's just say they double their prices, or Azure's prices go slashed in half, and you're like, well, that's too big of an offer not to take. You can technically just lift and shift, because Kubernetes enables that. And then what Julia's saying here is, if you have some sort of unique case where you're like, well, we need to interface with that thing over there, but we want to do it in this agnostic way, is you can produce these custom resources inside of Kubernetes that allow you to interface with that external thing that's unique to your situation, interface with them through standard Kubernetes manifest files. And then in the event that that thing goes away, you could potentially replace it with something else, and your manifest should ideally, hopefully, stay the same. That is super powerful. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that. Okay, so this is a great link from ADV. Thanks, mate. So we've got container network interface, CNI, container runtime interface, CRI, and container storage interface, CSI. Works in extending the functionality of Kubernetes, as well as its support for new and custom hardware. Let's get started, shall we? Yeah, that's really cool. I'm going to give this a read. I'm not going to do it now on the stream. We've got 10 minutes left, so ideally we want to definitely be looking at questions coming from people. Was looking for a replacement to Notion and Confluence. Thanks for the tip about ClickUp. So ClickUp is a project management more than it is sort of note taking. I use this Remarkable, but that's a physical device. It does sync to cloud, your cloud account, etc., and you can get it on your phone. But that's more a physical device, and they're also quite expensive. So it's not something that I would say, yeah, go out and get a Remarkable. They are good, but they're expensive. Notion I did like. However, I just found that I'd stopped using it, just sort of naturally stopped using it. It didn't feel right, didn't sort of organically sit right with me. So I think that's why the Remarkable was pretty powerful. But ClickUp could be a good way of organizing your notes and your ideas. It's very powerful. I really like the interface. The free version should give you enough to work with. But yeah, my brother and I use it to manage all of the streams, all the videos, all the content, the backlog of work on the book, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so yeah, no, but ClickUp is nice. I would recommend it. And that was a good link, ADV. Thank you. No, I haven't actually.
Go to any random repo. So you like go to any random repo and then type that.
Confirm. Let's have a look. Okay. Let's go to our DevOps Launch Terraform challenges then. All right, ready? Gonna hit dot. Oh, the editor. Ah, is this the new? So this is VS Code.
It's your private web editor.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a thing editor.
Oh.
So it still allows you to just go to navigate and move to the tab and your familiar workflow.
That's very nice. I like that. Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, I can see that being extremely useful. Yeah, wow. Okay, so you can even... it's basically... That's just full-on VS Code in a browser.
Yeah, it's VS Code.
That's really cool. I like that. That's really nice. I was actually very interested in using workspaces. In the end, first of all, it's not available to me. You got to be an enterprise business customer to even look at it.
Workspace or Codespace?
Oh, Codespaces. Yeah, I think it is.
It's already GA right now.
Blazing fast. Oh, is it this one? Is it generally availability now?
Yeah, it's GA now.
Ah, okay. I'd have to check the pricing because from what I remember, it was pretty expensive.
If I remember correctly, from my memory, if I remember correctly, it is free for public.
Yeah, so Codespaces is available for organizations using GitHub Team, GitHub Enterprise Cloud. So I don't, maybe it's not GA. Code. Navigate to template repository and select use this template. Okay. Template. Sure.
One way in theory to check, there's actually one way to really check is if you put any other repo public wise.
Mm-hmm.
If you put on the right side where
It does look good though. I was interested in it as a product because I wanted to move everything remotely so I could just go home and pick up where I left off. But in the end, I found that I just went with a $10 a month light sale instance SSH, and then just remote SSH plugin for local VS Code, and it just does that.
I thought you were going to say code server.
No. I didn't want VS Code or anything to be remote, and I go through the browser. I wanted the native client, and yeah, that's what I get. It's super fast.
Hey, the unlisted dot one, like the one that's read only, at least that is available for anyone.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's a great tip. Thank you. That's really, really nice. I like that. So I can just do it in here. Yeah, that's really, really nice. I must admit, that is really cool. And then you can just go through, because you get all your instant syntax highlighting, line numbers, you can just copy paste.
Definition and everything. Like you don't get your local definition, your not LSP, but your intelligence stuff.
Yeah, you get everything. That's really nice. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Be interested to see if GitLab try and do anything to compensate, because I reckon their editor could be a bit better. It's pretty nice, but I reckon it could be better. I couldn't see myself editing in this way, but I can definitely see why I would come in here to run it. Remote Explorer. What happens if you click that? Okay. You can create issues in here. So can I? Interesting. Okay. That's edit the. Oh, I see. Sorry, I did that. Okay. Issue title, labels. Okay, so you could create an issue in there. Let's bring that back up. Pull requests. So I could create a pull request waiting for my review. Oh, okay. So if you own the repository, you can actually come in here and actually manage things like pull requests and stuff as well. Yeah, you can come to here, branch, new branch, list your branches, etc. I don't use this. Yeah, I tend to just I use Control tilde, and then I just work in here. I just do git commands in here. I find that for me just works, less friction, but. So with the remote setup, what happens is you connect, you use remote SSH plugin, you add a host to it, points at the key, the host, etc. It SSHs in, and then it does something, and it literally uploads and injects either the whole of VS Code or some VS Code process, which will run on the box. You'll see it in PS, you'll see a Node.js process running, and then it talks back. And then if I do Control tilde, I get a bash prompt locally on the remote system. So any commands I type are all remote. So I git clone everything remotely. Everything goes onto that VM, which I snapshot every night. And then if I then lock here, go home, I then open up VS Code, it does the reconnection, does the sync, which is near instant. What it will also do, which is really nice as well, is, so imagine VS Code running on my local desktop natively. It's got the remote SSH connection. If I edit a file in my book, for example, and I do save, and then I bring up the terminal and I type in, so I go into the virtual Python virtual environment and I do mkdocs serve. Mkdocs will generate the site, serve it up on a development web server, and then VS Code will detect that it's listening on a port on the VM, and it'll do an SSH tunnel locally, and it'll bind a local port to that port. And so then I can view the book at 127.0.0.1 port 8000, and that's going over the SSH tunnel, and it's just instant. It just does it automatically. It's really, really nice. Yeah, I was actually surprised at just how nice that was. And that's just converted me completely. So I just keep everything all in the remote. I try and do a push. I try and do commits and pushes on a regular basis, but that means that if I forget and I go home, I can just crack open the laptop, jump on, and just do it. Yeah, it's great. It's really nice. All right. Well, thanks very much for turning up, everyone. I really appreciate it. I'm going to call it a day there for the Wednesday stream. So only an hour on the Wednesday. I really should bring water because my throat is sore. But I've got a little puppy over here that wants to be walked. She wants to head home. So I'm going to go walk her home now. But thanks for coming. Some great questions there. Adrian, really good questions. Julio, great questions. ADV, thanks for that link. That's a really nice link. I'm going to give that a read. And I hope everyone learned something today on the stream. And I'll see you around on the server. Awesome.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Meg. You too. You think you need sleep, Meg, so go to sleep.
Will do.
See you, everyone. Very nice.